Hey guys and girls, Board Now back with Rachel McDonald. On this video we will be talking about Stranger Things Season 1 Episode 4 Chapter 4. It is called The Body, and that obviously relates to the body which was found at the end of the last episode, which it did turn out was Will. The fallout of that stuff, it's the fallout as far as Joyce is concerned, who is convinced that then it isn't Will at all, because she's convinced that she was talking to him right before the body would have been found. So she's convinced that she's had this contact with Will, and that obviously bleeds in a little bit to like reality. And in real life, it's if you've lost someone, where even if the evidence is plain to see, you still don't want to sort of believe it. Obviously, in this case, with it being a show like Stranger Things, there could be some legitimacy to her feeling. Starts to get suspicious about the government interaction, and the fact that they actually called someone in to do the autopsy rather than it being the regular guy. That's sort of the first thing that twigs him off, that there might be conspiracy stuff at foot here.
Yes.
And it's actually quite a big episode for Hopper as a character. I think this is quite a big Hopper one. We see obviously more stuff with Nancy, with Jonathan. We see Nancy becoming even more drawn towards Jonathan and drawn towards what's going on and trying to get answers about Barb. Nancy and Joyce, if I had to choose, I would say they're the MVPs of the episode. I would say I think it's a really good episode for Nancy, and the actress as well, I think, really excels in it. I'm thinking particularly of the scene where she does have this fight with Karen.
Yes.
I mean, I thought that was a really good scene, and she does feel like a very natural sort of teenage girl.
Like you said, so much goes down in this episode. It's actually crazy to think how much they managed to pack into a 50-minute episode and still make it feel like it's not overcrowded, because it doesn't feel overcrowded. It just feels like everything is just kind of happening. So Joyce in this episode, and I'll probably touch a bit on Jonathan too, because I think Joyce and Jonathan in this episode, it's really devastating to watch the two of them, because you have Joyce on one side who knows what she knows, that she's contacted Will, that she's heard him, that he's still alive, and then they're trying to present her with this idea that no, we found the body. And you can see Jonathan getting so upset with her because he has no reason to believe her. I mean, we can believe her because we've seen what she's seen, but no one else has seen it. So I feel like, again, I know I mentioned this in the last episode, she's kind of like a Cassandra, like she's telling the truth, but no one is believing her. And I think like Jonathan as a character is not a character I feel that strongly about, but I do feel very bad for him in this episode, because, he and Joyce have, some conversations where he's like, come on, mum, stop this. We need to go see Will. We need to, there's all these things that need to be done. They have that kind of fight outside the store. Where, he's like, well, while you're talking to the lights, the rest of us are going to be burying Will. And you just know that this kid has had to take on like more responsibility because his mum is a single mum and his dad is a freaking deadbeat. And, I just feel so bad for both of them, because Joyce is so distraught and she knows that she's telling the truth, but Jonathan doesn't know it. So all he sees is that his mother is falling apart at a moment where he really needs her to be together. And just the two of them, it's so sad to see them both trying to struggle with their grief and, with trying to work with the other. You see that Jonathan has to go to the funeral home and pick up the coffin, and it's just really, really sad.
He's off all this stuff, all the characters' reaction, it just feels so authentic and so like they probably would react, and it just makes it feel like a big deal compared to some TV shows that maybe they'll rush it and they don't give it the time, but this really gives it the time. And obviously, again, we've sort of given Winona Ryder compliments, but again, she deserves them in this episode. Like, she really goes peak acting again and selling her torment, and it's such a physical performance as well, because when she's like stomping around the house and shouting and trying, when it's so beautiful, because when he's he's actually being very supportive.
He is. He's being so beautiful with Joyce.
It's a great scene because he is like, yeah, he's not just doing the typical, and he's not just being patronising. He does sort of mean it. But yeah, he obviously brings up Sarah. He says, you know, when Sarah had gone, I thought I saw her and stuff, and Joyce obviously responds with, like, that's grief, you know, this is different. I need you to believe, you know, I know he's still around, that kind of thing. I'm not crazy, she says at one point. And yeah, it's just, it's a really sensitive scene of it's like Joy Division, this time with the song Silence. That's the song they use in the scene, sort of as it like ends type thing, and it cuts around.
Is that when she stalks out to the, is that when she goes out to the shed and she gets the axe and she comes back in and she like sits there waiting for the monster to come back in? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, and I think it might have a bit of a montage where you get different characters as well. But it's really good stuff. Really good stuff between them, and you know, Hopper and the two. And because one thing I noticed about that scene as well is that she calls him Hopper at one point, which is almost like a little nickname, and I think that's just one of those things where it's like they've known each other for years, so she feels like confident giving him a little nickname. So that's something I definitely like as well.
I love that scene with him and Joyce because I think it's a good build up into how he ends up treating her for the rest of the season and into season 2. He's so good with her. He's so, you know, he doesn't feel condescending. He doesn't feel like he's talking down to her. He feels like he's talking from one grieving parent to another, trying to help her. And I also think that he's really good with Jonathan as well, because we see him and Jonathan at the morgue and he's like, you know, I'll take care of this. You take care of your mum. And, you know, he reassures Jonathan, and I just think Hopper in this episode is so wonderful, and I just love his characterization, and I love that I think they really show in this episode how he is a big time detective, you know, because I think, like, you know, because when he hears about how they brought someone in from state to do the autopsy, it's like his spidey sense just goes off, and you think kind of, you know, maybe like your basic town sheriff might not pick up on that, but because he's from the big city and he knows things, it's like something goes off in his brain, and even though he's seen the body and he's seen proof, he just starts to think maybe there's something else going on here, and you see the wheels start to turn. And I love that he trusts his instincts and he goes to investigate and he, you know, he starts actually like following his gut, and I think that's just such a great character building moment for him, because it shows that he does have that background of being a big city detective.
Yeah, it's good instincts, and we see in Hopper, then in this episode, not only is he a good at his job, but we also see then he's coming from a good place as well. He is sincere, because that's something where when you see him in the first episode, you maybe wouldn't get that so much. You may think, he could be a bit self-serving, that kind of thing, but I think also what I like in this episode is he obviously doesn't always play by the rules. He's like a renegade in this episode, because he cozies up to the guy in the bar, the guy who it turns out, like, it appears as though they paid him to be a witness.
Yes, to find the body.
He found the body, and when he doesn't give him information, he roughs him up outside the bar, and then. There's quite a funny scene, isn't it, where when he breaks into the morgue, where he actually gets caught in a lie, like he says the wrong person's name.
He's like, O'Bannon's waiting for you, and he's like, I don't work with O'Bannon. He's like, did I say O'Bannon? I mean, he just punches him in the face. It's like such a great moment. Yeah.
But so in this episode, and obviously it ends with another example, because once he actually obviously sees Will's body, and there's something non-human substance-wise in the body, so that's kind of confirms then it's not really Will, but and it actually ends with him sledgehammer to like the gate or something at the lab, so he's literally going to break to the lab, which is a great final shot. But I think I just feel with Hopper in this episode where he does go renegade, but you don't mind because he's doing it from a good place, and it's
Yeah.
almost this sense of, well, they're not playing by the rules, so why should I'm going to
Exactly.
combat it
Yes.
with,
Yes.
that's the only
Exactly.
way to win sometimes. You've got to
It's
play
a
them at their
great
own game.
episode.
Yeah. And he's
Yeah.
obviously really funny with it, just like going undercover and stuff, or pretending to.
Yeah.
And then when it doesn't quite work out, a simple fist, or he roughs them up. So, yeah, there's some
And
great.
we have a little Stephen King shout out in that scene because the guard is reading Cujo and he comes in and he's like, I love that book. It's one angry mutt. Yeah, he said that's one angry mutt. So yeah, so it's a nice little shout out there.
That's
yeah.
cool. That's cool.
So Hopper in this episode is fantastic.
Really
Joyce
good.
and Jonathan just break my hearts in this episode. And then of course you have the kids, because the kids are feeling very upset because they believe that Will is actually gone. And you see Mike and Elle down in the basement, and Mike is telling her off and he's like, you hurt me, you lied to me. And poor Elle again, Millie Bobby Brown with the facial expressions just makes me want to just wrap Elle up in a blanket and give her cocoa and tell her that everything's going to be okay because she's so little. But she's fiddling with the walkie-talkie. And she manages to channel Will, and we get a little reference to the "Should I Stay or Should I Go" by The Clash, because you hear him singing it in the Upside Down. And oh my God, like I know we don't see it, but like the fact that Will is trapped in this other world by himself for so long, like that poor kid, like God knows what he's going through on that side, what's happening to him, how scared he must be. It's like, it's not something that you think about that often because we don't really see him in there. We see everything on this side, but to think of what he's going through in there and how long he's trapped there. And then, of course, he's singing that song maybe to comfort himself or, to remind himself that, he's got people that care about him. So, so Mike discovers that, yes, Will is actually alive. And I love the scene. We see Karen, I don't really want to go to school. Karen again, just the best mum ever. She's all, when she's all like, we could go to the movie store, we could get a movie R-rated if you want. R-rated, it's like all these cool mums letting their kids watch the the PG-13 and the R-rated movies. And Karen's just beautiful. And then, but Mike's like, no, I feel ill. I just want to stay here. And then he calls Lucas on the walkie-talkie. And I love how Lucas is ignoring him. And he's like, Lucas. And he just doesn't stop until Lucas picks up the walkie-talkie. And he's like, what? What do you want? And so, they bring him over to Elle. And again, Lucas is, like you said, in the previous episode, very harsh. Again, just calling Elle a weirdo. And when they're talking about like sneaking her into the school, he's like, look at her. And I'm like, dude, come on. She's like sitting right there. You can't be just a little bit nicer. Like, come on.
I'm sort of assuming this will be the last episode of that now. I think where we're going now, I think hopefully that will be the last time. But it did get a little bit much these last two episodes. But pretty much everything they do with the kids in this episode is really good.
It is.
There's some great stuff out at the school where they do the makeover with her, and that's obviously a nice different look for her to get her in the school. And the stuff when they have to cover with the science teacher is like hilarious.
Oh, so good.
Because like she doesn't know what to say, and obviously they cover for her name when she's about to say 11 or something, and they say that she's
like Eleanor.
Yeah, that's it. And Mike's cousin, she's here for like the ceremony sort of thing. And I just love the Sweden stuff because Elle is about to say from a dark place, isn't she? Always like,
she says bad place. She's like, bad place. Sweden. She hates it there. It's cold.
It's
Sub-zero.
Sub-zero. Yeah, just so funny.
And once again, the science teacher, Mr. Clark, he's so beautiful and he's so good with the boys. Like, I love how he basically says to them, he's like, look, boys, just come to the assembly and then, the kit is yours for the rest of the day. And he throws them the keys, He's so beautiful, the science teacher. He's like one of my favorite minor characters. I think he's just so great.
Have that trust with a teacher it really pays off, because I think
Yes.
it's now, obviously in this case, obviously they are doing something quite devious, but in general, you know, to have that trust, I think it really connects with the students, because it's like, yeah, he's not always, he trusts us, he's not always ragging on us, that sort of thing. So it sort of does bring them more to your level type thing. So it's
and
cool
then we have
stuff.
the assembly. Yeah, it's good. And then you got the assembly, and you've got Elle's little revenge on the bullies, which of course sets up a later conflict, but is also just really satisfying to watch, you know, because these bullies are, once again, we're talking about a kid who they all believe is dead. And they're just like, even like after the kid is like dead, they're like still calling him like a fairy, and like, you know, making fun of him. And it's just really awful. Like, I know that kids can be like little sociopaths, but these two are like really nasty. So seeing Elle like freeze the guy in his tracks and make him piss himself is like, it's very satisfying to watch. You know, it's like, it's good stuff.
Yeah, because
And
it's right in front of the school and everything. So it's definitely sweet revenge. Yeah.
And I think it shows how protective Elle and Mike are of each other, you know, like she's so protective of Mike, and and then it's just a great character building, showing how she's getting, you know, more used to being in the group and getting more attached to Mike, and it's actually like a really good person to have in their corner. And then, you know, they take her to the radio to see if she can connect with Will. And this is such a great scene. I love this scene. I love how it plays out simultaneously with Joyce talking to Will. Now,
me too.
the theory that I came up with this time, because I was like, because before, Joyce has only been able to talk to Will through the lights. But in this episode, she actually sees him. She manages to rip a hole in her wall and rip a little hole through to the upside down. So she actually physically can see him. Now, my theory is that she's able to do that because Elle is channeling him. And so Elle is kind of opening up a gate to the upside down. And because she's channeling Will, that allows Joyce to actually get through to the upside down to see him. Because we know that Elle is powerful enough to go between, to channel between the two worlds. So at least that was what I thought. That's the reason that Joyce was able to actually reach through and see him. Is because Elle's channeling.
That seems to make sense, rather than it could have just been a visual that was appearing in her head, or just another like random reason. But no, that makes sense, I think.
And again, just another heartbreaking but also beautiful scene for Joyce, where she goes and she gets the axe and she breaks down the wall because she thinks that she's gonna, you know, break through to the other side. And then that look of utter despair and confusion as she sees that she's just looking outside into her own front yard. Like, she's so confused because she's just seen her son and she's literally just talked to him. He's been like this far away from her, and she breaks down what she thinks is the wall, and it's just the outside. And just, Winona again is just so good in that scene. Oh, and the music in that scene, like one of my favorite bits of music in the series plays during that scene. It's that beautiful synth kind of intense dramatic music, and it's just works so well. So the kids storyline is so good because, you know, they get to find out that Will is actually alive. You know, they get confirmation that their friends are alive, and then, you know, you can see them starting to get close to Elle. You know, they're concerned about her after she's reached through the other side because she's obviously weakened, and they get her out of there. So that's just a beautiful scene. And I guess the last bit in this is the Jonathan and Nancy stuff, because as we said earlier, Jonathan is obviously feeling very alone at the moment, very isolated. He thinks that his mum is hallucinating. He knows that she's had anxiety problems before. He's having to go and organize the funeral and everything by himself. And I mean, for a 17-year-old kid to have to organize the funeral of your baby brother, it's a lot to take on. And I think it really shows how strong Jonathan can be and how he's had to be strong because his mother is a single mother who is doing her best. But she's a single mother in the 80s. There was a lot of stigma on it back then. You know, she obviously has to work long hours to support them. And but then we see Nancy come to him, which, look, I like Nancy, but girl, you don't go and bother someone while they're picking out a coffin for their baby brother. Like, timing,
she
girl,
did
timing.
apologise, but it's
She
almost
did,
like,
and I get that she's very desperate.
Wait, sort of thing.
It's like, come on, girl.
Natural progression, because she kind of has the fight. So there's a lot of stuff going on in her life at this, because this point, because it's sort of interesting. And Karen didn't even know that Steve and her were dating, let alone that they'd obviously had sex, and that obviously becomes a big blow up between them when the police are like interviewing her at the school. But I like the way it all snowballs and it leads to her, because obviously she took the bits of the photograph from
the photos,
and you know, this is where it does feel like classic sort of detective type fiction. And I love, you know, tape, you know, because it's the 80s. Of course you're going to tape it back together. Nowadays, you know, it's very different, digital photos and that stuff, but it does give it that very pulpy detective type feel to it. She literally tapes it back together and she spots something. So stuff in this episode makes them more proactive. I will say Steve reaches a bit of an all-time low in this episode.
Steve is a bit of a dick in this
there's
episode.
Stuff later on that may be worse, but in this episode I think the stuff when he's more worried about his father finding out than
that
pie.
That's not a great look, Steve. I was watching that and I'm like, dude, come on. I mean, I think it is a very teenage thing. Like, I think it's very genuine and authentic for a teenage boy who's thrown a party. And also keep in mind, he's not close to Barb the way Nancy is. But by the same token, dude, your girlfriend's best friend has gone missing. Like, maybe some sympathy, you know, maybe some comfort. Maybe don't be thinking about yourself and what your dad's going to say. So I think it's not a great moment, but it is also a very genuine, authentic teenage moment, you know, for someone of that age to have when you hear that the police are going to be investigating. It's like, oh shit, I'm going to get in trouble. And but it's like, come on, dude, be better. Like, be a bit more supportive to your girlfriend.
It's more to Jonathan. Obviously, they start investigating. So I do have a question at this point, because obviously we've both said Jonathan like isn't one of our favorite characters. I think he gets a little bit better, probably just because, as we said, some of the stuff with having to deal with like the funeral and also Nancy. I think his association with Nancy makes him a bit more, you know, likable, or, you know, kind of thing, or maybe interesting. But I've just a general question about, obviously, because we're heading for a little bit of a love triangle here. Now, putting aside the fact that you really like Steve, did you ever see him with Nancy, or did you think her more natural partner is Jonathan type thing?
I honestly didn't feel too strongly either way until the end of the season, and then we'll talk about it when we get there, when we get to the reveal of who she ends up with. No, I found in season 1, when she was with Steve, I was like, okay, cool. When she was with Jonathan, I was like, okay, cool. Like, I really didn't like feel strongly either way. I was more invested in like Nancy as a character just by herself, and not really interested in I thought that her and Jonathan getting close was done very naturally. I think that, you know, shared trauma, shared loss is something that does bring people together. But I do also think she had enough chemistry with Steve to bring it on. So it was like my feelings towards like the love triangle tend to get stronger towards the end of a season and in season 2. In season 1, it was more just kind of like I was a bit neutral about the whole thing, really. What about you?
Romance or not, I'd say she's more interested in associating with Jonathan.
Okay.
Because I sort of feel that in this first season, I guess they could have done it with Steve, but I guess it was going to be the thing where it was going to be hard for her to be more proactive, sticking with Steve. I think obviously it naturally makes them more proactive with Jonathan, and obviously they have that in common, don't they? Because they both have been through a similar thing now.
Yes.
So I guess I would say, regardless of whether it needs to be a romance per se, I think her stuff with Jonathan is more interesting than her stuff with Steve. Her stuff with Steve is fine, but you know, it's not as interesting. I guess it might have been, and obviously we get a little bit of it in season 2, but I guess it would have been interesting seeing like a fully proactive Nancy with Steve, so to speak, you know.
Yeah, that would have been,
And we get a little bit of that in season 2, but obviously we'll talk more about that another
Yeah,
time.
no, when we get to the end of this season, I'll talk about, how my
Okay.
feelings like developed about that, because obviously there's stuff that happens there. But yeah, at this point in time, and I remember when I was first watching, I wasn't really invested in either ship. I was more just interested in, and Nancy as a character, Steve subverting my expectations, and then Jonathan doing his thing. So it's like, individually, I like them. Wasn't too interested in the love triangle, just kind of enjoying the story instead.
I actually found out today, and I guess it's not surprising, but they date in real life, don't they?
Yes, they do. Charlie Heaton and Natalia Dwyer are dating. So that's probably why their chemistry kind of translates on screen a bit more.
He does brood a lot. I don't think he looks down a lot. He needs to practice looking up.
Yes, I do like that he does apologize for taking the photos in this episode. And he says, it was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. So they at least acknowledge that. So I like that. Oh, and I was going to say before, and then we got a bit off track. I like that when she comes to him and she's talking about how she saw the man at the thing. She was like, it was almost like he didn't. And John was like, he didn't have a face. And you can see him start to realize, maybe my mum isn't crazy. And that's like, this is like the turning point for him to like start believing that maybe his mother is actually telling the truth and something bigger is going on. And of course, this is going to lead into like more stuff for Jonathan and Nancy in the future, with them being proactive and trying to figure out what exactly is going on. But I like that you see that moment for Jonathan, because as we said, he and Joyce in this episode are very much at odds with each other, and he's very frustrated with her for not taking anything seriously. But now he's starting to realize that maybe she really is telling the truth, and maybe something is going on here that I need to look into.
I think, what you just said there is why this show is so well written, because everything sort of makes sense. Everything there's a progression, and an event happens that makes them go to this place. It doesn't just happen willy-nilly.
Yes, definitely.
So obviously, seeing that photograph and hearing what Nancy says actually makes him start to believe in Joyce. And I remember at first he sort of dismisses it as saying, well, it's probably like the lens flare or something, or the angle of the shot. But it's when they're in the red room later on.
When he develops the photos.
And he says, that does look a lot like what my mum sort of described. So that's really good stuff. But they definitely have a bit of a Mulder and Scully vibe, I think, John.
Yes, they do, don't they? Yeah.
Definitely. So, and I think some of the conspiracy theory stuff in this episode, that has an X-Files sort of feel as well. So
yeah, definitely, with Hopper investigating the government and the cover-up and everything like that. Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Great stuff, this one.
I think that's everything. I think, really strong episode. I think maybe this and the pilot are the best two episodes so far.
I think so, yes.
This is a real big hitter. I think just all the stuff with every character and all the storytelling really hitting all the high notes in this. Some really emotional scenes. I mean, obviously that opener with Joyce and Hopper is so moving, so to watch. So great stuff again, Stranger Things. So that's episode 4, The Body. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe as always. You can share us out on social media. You can ding the bell on YouTube to get notifications. Another big Netflix show we did not too long ago was The Haunting of Hill House. So you can find all 10 reviews of that up on the channel now. Sort of a nice companion piece to Stranger Things, I would say. Support me on Patreon, which is patreon.com/boardnow, which you can find things like commentaries on there. I did my latest X-Files commentary just the other night, so you can find that. That's of the episode Squeeze, the 3rd episode from the opening season, which is a big hitter, so you can find my commentary for that episode up there now. And Rachel, if you want to promote your channel.
You can follow me at Rachel McDonald, video essays discussing TV shows and movies, mostly TV shows from the late 90s and early 2000s. My Tumblr and my Twitter accounts are through my YouTube channel, so come and follow me everywhere. Keith usually is kind enough to put a link in the description so that you can find me nice and easy. So come follow me everywhere you can.
Thanks, guys. Keep watching TV, and we'll be back with more Stranger Things soon. See you later.